Mahmoud Khalil's trial today. He's going to get a quick hearing to see if we can deport him. He's in jail in Louisiana, and we hope to throw him out for violating his green card and associating with a known terrorist group for the unrest we've seen in Colombia over the last 2.5 years since the attacks on October 7th, and who knows what he was doing before. And we're watching Democrats rally to his side. And this, to me, is another, should trans men play in women's sports? Are you kidding me? This is an 80-20 issue. You're going to bat for somebody who thinks that Hamas was right on October 7th, whose group was handing out posters trumpeting Sinwar as a great leader and Nasrallah as someone who belongs, someone we should show allegiance to? That's what you're defending?
I think this is going to be a very interesting case to watch move through the courts. It will define, I think, in many ways, how you can break your agreement with the United States of America under the privilege of having a green card. I thought Caroline Leavitt was very on point yesterday when she talked about the incredible opportunity that Khalil had when he came to the United States of America to attend one of our most prestigious universities. It is a right and a privilege to be in this country. He came here from Syria. Many people have these opportunities. But the problem for Democrats, and I think 13 of them signed this letter asking for him to be able to stay here. And then I thought it was also interesting, the Dem Senate Judiciary Committee on their X post also said free Khalil. In a post. I don't think they ever said anything about protecting Jewish students on campus who were losing their right to go to their classes. This is a confrontation, I think, that is very important to watch really closely in America. We're looking right now at a live shot in New York City. There are a lot of people out there trying to protect his right to stay here. A lot of people outside the courthouse right now. So this is a really important fight, and let's see what this judge has to say about Khalil and whether or not he can stay. But
right, because the thing is, did he violate it? He married an American. You also brought up, you understand that sometimes you meet that perfect person and you rush to the altar. But here he comes over and is married in 11 months.
That's right.
He's a married guy still living on campus. You said he has some credits?
Schumer was like, this kid, he's 30 years old. He lives on the Columbia campus. And yes, he came here from Syria. And within 11 months of arriving in the country, he had married an American citizen. As you say, maybe it was love at first sight. And they found each other and decided to get married right away. There are a lot of questions about this young man. Who's supporting him? Why is Columbia allowing him to continue to live in campus? It sounds like he's living in campus housing, and there's some question about whether or not he is like a credit short. Maybe he wants to stay a credit short so he can stay in housing. But we got to keep asking these questions about who he is, who sent him here, and why he became a spokesperson for groups that are sympathetic to Hamas.
So one thing's emerged as the hostages have gotten out. They said that Hamas has told them while they're in those tunnels and being held against their will, that they have direct links to American students, and they have direct links to some of these terror groups in the West. And that's when we see the riots in London and around in France and Paris, and then we see it here in Colombia. They're financing a lot of this. I mean, who gets up in the morning and goes, I'm going to go fight for the Palestinians. After all, they just killed and put babies into ovens. This is the perfect time not to go to class and to torture Jewish students on campus. Where does that come from?
It's so important to remind people what happened on October 7th. And the reaction from Israel was devastating in Gaza. But Hamas knew that if we go in there and we kill families, I will never forget the video that I watched of these two little boys screaming and crying after they watched their father get shot and killed and asking, why am I still alive?
Amazing.
Because he watched his father be killed by these animals, okay? So let's remember how we got here. And I think that what we watched happen in November is, as we were talking about before, Brian, people want a return to patriotism, to common sense. This doesn't make sense that we are allowing people in this country who hate the country and who support Iran and the terrorists who want to remove us from the face of the earth.
This is why it's so important what happens next. We saw the most impossible situation. If I told you a year ago that Nasrallah would be dead, higher-ups in Hezbollah would be killed,
absolutely.
Hamas, they'd lose 17,000 people, Iran would be neutralized, the attack back would not happen because their missile defense and their nuclear program was already damaged, and they aren't capable of doing it, that Syria would have a dicey revolution. But one thing is clear, the Sunni leaders want nothing to do with Iran. So they're now isolated. Hezbollah is now neutralized for now, and Hamas is on their heels. So now you have a president in the White House who thoroughly is in lockstep with the prime minister of Israel. I mean, Hamas got to be saying, how the hell did we lose this narrative? What happens next is so critical. How do you feel about some of the blowback Adam Bowler has gotten from going into Gaza and meeting with Hamas?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that this administration believes that you can't get anywhere if you're not going to have conversations. We see it happening in Russia. The president has also said he's open to negotiation with Iran, and he's basically laid on the table. And Iran obviously is a sponsor of all of these groups, from Hamas to Hezbollah and across the board. He wants a negotiation with Iran, or it sounds like
war.
They're open to taking out those nuclear sites. And because Iran is as vulnerable as you have just laid out so well, Brian, a lot of people in Israel feel that this is the moment to destroy these sites where they have these nuclear weapons, which are getting closer and closer to being available to them as they enrich uranium at levels that we haven't seen in a very long time. So are they willing to shut those down? I really think, the more you listen to what President Trump is saying, whether with regard to Russia, with regard to Iran, he wants to take down weapons in the world. And you think back to the negotiations that Reagan was part of. She wants to lower the temperature of, country blasting, country removing weaponry in this world. And I think that's part of what he's trying to do here with Iran. But if they're not going to listen and they're not going to come to the table, they've obviously been belligerent in their response already, then I think you might see the ability to take out some of these sites.
So a couple of things are going on right now. It came out too over the last 2 weeks that the Russians transmission was uncovered. The Russians giving coordinates to the Houthi rebels about where to aim for ships, how to take out ships, and of course, don't touch China and Russia. So you see Russia's fingerprints everywhere. When Russia was using Syria, and this is why I think it's so important to pressure this government in Syria, whatever they are, to make sure the Russians stay out. Because if they could lose that base in Syria, that'll make it harder for them to get weapons in and out of Iran, because Iran can no longer use that as a lane. And that would further hurt their ability to give weapons to these moccasin-wearing rebels who seem to have the most sophisticated arms in the region. Well, so this is a whole thing, how it's related.
It is. But I think what's very interesting to watch in, what I am seeing develop as a Trump doctrine about global affairs, he wants to empower countries with economic strength. That's why he wants to be on the ground with a minerals deal in Ukraine. And he's signaling that if we have investments around the world, Greenland, Panama, look at what happened in Panama. You now have a huge investment powerhouse, American investment powerhouse, that's going to own both ends of the canal in Panama. So this is what I'm watching super closely.
BlackRock, is it?
Yeah, super closely, because I think that what he's trying to empower is prosperity around the globe with our allies. Now, look what he did in Europe, backing away, saying, you know what, you're on your own, right? We're not going to back you anymore. We're going to make sure that you ramp up your defense. What does that do? It increases production in Europe. It increases prosperity in Europe. It puts more people to work with their defense industry. You heard this from Keir Starmer. You've heard it from other leaders in Europe. So I think that it's very interesting when you stop empowering people and you force them to empower themselves. They're on our side. Europe is our largest trading partner by far, right? So I think this is it's a delicate balance, but I see where he's going, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if it can work.
If you reapproach them after they've already committed and you see them actually building up their militaries.
Right.
I think Europe views their military like we view the space program. Yeah, I'd like to get it. I'd like to improve it, but I have other priorities.
They've been codependent on us for so long that they have had the luxury of not having to have a serious defense. So what they're doing is realizing that doesn't exist anymore. We're officially in a post-World War II era. It is 80 years since the war. A lot of those programs and these relationships were built to help Europe after the war, to make sure that they could survive and be strong strong enough against Germany, emerging again as a problem for Europe a third time. But we are past that now. We're 80 years down the road, and it's time for them to take care of themselves. I think they know that message, and I think they're trying to put it into place.
Now, put yourself in Macron's shoes and Stormer's shoes. If you say that before, when Joe Biden's president, a lot of people go, no, I don't think so. We have other social programs we've got to spend it on. But now they turn around, they hop on behind the microphone, they go, look, America's pulling back. We need to build up our defense. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no choice.
Yeah. And
so then they start purchasing that.
They get it immediately. It's so interesting, the dynamic. And Biden was always afraid to push anybody in this regard. They're our allies.
He's always half measured.
And you hear when Starmer and Macron both come to the White House, what do they say over and over? The long-term relationship we share with your country, the long-term friendship. They're going back to World War II. They like that framework, and I get it because it's worked really well for them, but it's over because the president is talking about peace through strength. He wants everyone to exhibit that strength, and then he doesn't want to fight wars in the Middle East. I don't think he wants to take out these facilities in Iran based on what he has said. He doesn't like war. War is unpredictable, and you don't know how it's going to end, so you avoid it through prosperity and strength.
Martha, I think that anybody who sits in that seat knows that if you decide to strike anywhere and people die, you say to yourself, if I didn't make that decision, that 26-year-old is still alive. So I get it. And I think President Trump feels that. But I also think he talks to Saudi Arabia. I think he talks to our allies in the region. And they realize there is one problem in the area. There's problems in the Middle East and there's problems. But if you look at what has happened since 9/11, 2001, there's one country causing havoc with the Houthi rebels, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and against Israel. And it is Iran. And if they get a nuclear weapon, then everybody gets a nuclear weapon.
Understood. And it's very clear from the president's words that he does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But I think he looks at strengthening the pieces around and continuing isolation of them. You go after these, look at Syria, look at Hezbollah, look at what the job that Israel has done.
China and Russia have now made a partnership.
Agreed. China is in deep economic problems right now. We need to recognize how vulnerable China actually is right now. And Russia is never as strong as they like to project around the world. You remember after the Cold War when we went in, we actually saw some of the stuff they had, rusted out equipment. Yeah. I remember, as a college student, I was studying in Vienna, and there was this trip that you could go on to see Russia. They had these military parades. It was all rusty old equipment. I mean, they talk a big game. I think that strengthening our allies is the route to isolating and diminishing some of these truly troublesome powers, as you point out.
When the smart minds sit around in the military room and the situation room and look at it, I think that Iran might be the one area in which it's beneficial to everyone to just take out that nuclear program.
I understand the argument for that.
If you get it, we will get it.
And you may not have a moment where they're as vulnerable as they are right now.
And thanks to Israel.
Their entire front line of defense, I was listening to a former IDF intelligence officer talk about this, and Iran's whole front line of defense has been knocked out by Israel. And those are the areas that protect those nuclear sites. So they don't have the military protection that they used to have for them. It is a unique moment. But I think that President Trump, based on things he has said, believes that those attacks, they don't always have predictable outcomes.
Yep. Although Israel has shown us 2.5 years, they've been pretty awesome. So maybe that you give them the bombs.
Well, look at the change in Israel with the response to Netanyahu, right? I mean, he just kept pushing forward in destroying as much as he could the infrastructure of Iran and their proxies. And now he is much more popular.
Right. And Biden was taking credit for it at the end of his term.